What's up, everybody? It's Michael. I'm coming to you from Hollywood, California. I want to address the elephant in the room, which is my old band, Vampires Everywhere. And, I've been getting a lot of questions from fans in the past, even fans that have tattoos on them with Vampires Everywhere. What did you do to the band? What happened? There was no last tour. There was no final warning. Well, I want to address all of that here right now. And the only way I can do that is start from the beginning. As most of you know or don't know, I started Vampires Everywhere in 2009. I started getting the concepts together. A little before that, I had different bands, pop punk bands, industrial bands. I had all sorts of stuff going on before this. So I took all of those ideals and I wanted to build them up into one idea that kind of represented of who I am and what kind of music I wanted to play at the time. Before that, I had a clothing line called Icky Metal Couture, and it was a lot of horror-based designs. And at that point in time, I was so engulfed in the whole gothic culture of everything, and I definitely wanted the band I was going to start to kind of, gravitate around that. So conceptually, it started in 2009. I started getting the ideas together, and then the name didn't come to fruition until like early 2010. And most of you know or don't know that the name comes from the movie The Lost Boys. Consequently, at that time, we were grouped in with vampire movies such as Twilight, and we got correlated to those things, but it was always started from my love from the movie The Lost Boys. And as most of you know or don't know that about me, that is my favorite movie. In all of my past bands, I used to play bass, I played a tiny bit of piano, and I always did backup vocals, whether it be screaming or harmonies. And that was kind of my place before I started Vampires Everywhere. Now, what ended up happening was I started off being like a screamer. Somebody that did a lot of tonals, screaming on key, low screams, high screams. I was all about that world, and that's kind of where I wanted to live. So when I started the band, I started a group, almost like a metal band, around my screaming. Now, when we started taking this seriously and the group was made, we traveled all the way to Baltimore to record the first, EP that would become later on Lost in the Shadows. And again, Lost in the Shadows is a song based off the Lost Boys soundtrack. We headed all the way to Baltimore to record with Paul Levitt. Now at that time, I was all in the scene, and Paul Levitt was doing the best albums. I loved his records. He did Dear Maria, For All Time Low, and many others. Look him up. He's super awesome guy, super mellow. So when we got into the studio in Baltimore, the whole band was ready to go. I mean, it was at that point in time where bands actually rehearsed. They weren't just rehearsing for tour. We would rehearse all the time in Hollywood, and it was a fun thing to do, and it was just a camaraderie that I haven't had since that day. It's just that old mentality of jumping into your garage and playing with your friends and coming up with awesome music. So we had all of that time together to conceptualize what we were going to do. The problem is that there was a lot of harmonies and melodies and all sorts of stuff that was supposed to end up in these songs, and here's how that went. So when we went to Baltimore with Paul Levitt to record, everybody did an amazing job, knocked out their parts right away. Now, I knocked out all the screaming parts and all the songs within a couple of hours, which I was really training myself at that time to the breathing and everything that goes with metal music and screaming. A lot of people don't know is that screaming and that metal type screaming takes a lot of skill, and you don't want to lose your voice. It takes a lot of breathing. So I was very proud of myself to have knocked out those songs so quickly. Now here comes the crap part, is our keyboard player at the time, just so you know in this video, I'm going to try not to name names. I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bridge unnecessarily. Our keyboard player at that time said he could handle the clean vocals, no problem, and all the melody would be laid down within a couple of hours, and we'd have, a finished product. So 3-4 hours pass, 5-6 hours pass. All of a sudden, Paul Levitt, the producer, comes in and tells me the keyboard player can't sing any of it. He tried to sing on the keyboard, when you connect it in and has some sort of weird filter to it. Even that wasn't on key enough to Melodyne onto the album, and I felt completely betrayed by the keyboard player because he had promised me that he could finish all of this. Now, that being said, I was in a dilemma, and I was like, what should I do? You know, I was never a lead singer in a band, and you know, this is 2009, you know, that wasn't my mind space at the time, my head space at the time, and I wasn't looking to go into the studio and, you know, scream all these songs and then sing all the rest. But someone had to do it, and that was me. So I entered the vocal booth. Now, since I wrote all of the lyrics for the song, I wasn't worried about knowing that part of the whole ordeal. Like, I knew that I would get the lyrics right. I knew that I wrote all the melodies before we went in there for, you know, the keyboard player to sing. So I was kind of familiar with that. So he put me on the microphone, and, you know, my voice is already a little shot from screaming all of that time. And then he's like, all right, let's sing these melodies. Now, I went in there and I did the best I possibly could. Now, mind you, the key we were in, all of that stuff, that wasn't relative to me at the time. It was so high, but I was doing my best to hit all of those, you know, melodies and all of the vocals and get the album done. So I gotta say that I went in there and I completed that, and that became what Lost in the Shadows is today. Now, if you're not familiar with Vampires Everywhere, Lost in the Shadows was our first EP. Now, after all of us sat down, all of us being the band, we wanted to pick a single off the album, and I think collectively, Immortal Love was the song that we chose. And, you know, it was a favorite one of mine because I really sat down with that song, and I went through every bit of the lyrics. You know, I sat in a hotel in Baltimore for so long, just like going through, you know, the dictionary, trying to pick out the words that best describe how I was feeling and also had a metaphorical sense to it. So Immortal Love became the first single. So then after that, I had to seek out, you know, a videographer to shoot the first music video. And luckily enough, someone introduced me to Scott Henson, which, you know, an amazing guy. If you haven't seen Scott's work, definitely check it out. Scott had us come all the way out to Virginia Beach. So after we came back from Maryland, we went back to LA, and then we flew to Virginia Beach. The whole band flew to Virginia Beach by Scott's house. Now, Scott had all his equipment out there, and it was very woodsy, okay, mind you. And so we went to the woods by Scott's house, where he set up all sorts of fire and all sorts of this cool shit that I didn't really imagine in the video. So he kind of conceptualized this whole idea for me. And he kind of took my storyboard and kind of just blew it out of the water. I mean, he really did an amazing job. At that time, I was friends with this girl named Trishelle, and she was on The Real World, and she agreed to be in the music video, which I think she did an amazing job. And I think conceptually, you know, all the video of that music video came out amazing, and, you know, Immortal Love was born now on video. So we got this EP made, we got this video made. Now, what to do then? At that point in time, YouTube wasn't like it was today. Like, plays were not the same, exposure was not the same. There was no crazy algorithm on Twitter, there was no crazy algorithm on YouTube. So if you put your video up, it was actually seen. So we ended up uploading it to YouTube, and I got a really cool PR agent, and they ended up pushing with us and getting all of this exposure. I mean, the video got onto MTV Headbangers Ball and garnered over 1 million plays within like 2 weeks, something crazy like that. And all of a sudden, we're getting hit up by record labels, we're getting hit up by all these different people that are now interested in the band. I mean, even at the time, I'm pretty positive Justin Bieber's mom hit me up on Twitter about it as well. There was a lot of exposure about this project. And now, mind you, I did not know that Twilight, again, was being released around the same time. I did not know that's the reason a lot of these teens, you know, or younger kids were trying to get into the band. But to me, it was like a conceptual idea to honor my favorite movie. And I was so stoked that all of these people were hitting me up about it, and it just garnered so much attention and, you know, so much hype. So we got to, at that point, have to sit down with somebody and start going, okay, who would we like to sign with? We ended up going with a label called Century Media. So, like I said before, I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus because, you know, anyone that believes in your music, anyone that shows you faith, anyone that thinks that what you've done, like your accomplishment in life, is an amazing, anyone that feels like your art that you've created could go somewhere and won't propel you to that direction, I don't like throwing those people under the bus. So I will say to you though, we ended up signing with Century Media Records, and immediately they wanted to get this rolling. So we signed this contract. We got this amazing agent, this amazing booking agent, and we got a whole team together getting ready to go with Vampires Everywhere. Now, just a little, not to backtrack too much, but just to let you know that some of the band members that were in my band, some were experienced and some were not. One of the guitar players came from a very small town. He had never toured before. He had no idea what was going on. Two of the players were brothers, and they were in some of my other bands back in the day in Florida. And then another one just came from MI, so it was an eclectic lineup, and everybody was kind of counting their chickens on the band. So when we got signed to Century Media, everybody was thinking their whole lives were made. Everything was going to happen for them, and their dreams are going to come true. Now, at that point in time, our dreams were coming true. All the people that I wanted to work with in the past, especially in the scene, I was now starting to work with, and things were progressing super fast. So at that time, they were like, oh, let's get this band on tour. Let's get this working. And so they got us on the Hot Topic tour with Black Veil Brides and a band called Get Scared. So I guess it's the Sacred Ceremony tour, if I do remember the name correctly, which was Black Veil Brides, Get Scared, us, I'm thinking another band. And that was right before Black Veil started to really explode. And we were on that tour, and it was amazing. I gotta be honest, that tour was amazing. There was kids waiting outside, lines and lines of kids. Anytime the vans pulled up, the kids would go crazy, shaking the vans. And all in all, that was an amazing experience. And Hot Topic really took a liking to our band, put our Lost in the Shadows EP directly by the register where people were paying. So we were getting a really large response from Hot Topic through all of their stores. Now, after that tour, they wanted us to go into the studio and record a full-length LP. Now, in 2010, around that time, 2010, 2011, I think it was still 2010, LPs were a big thing. Nowadays everyone's throwing out singles, throwing out EPs, doing that whole pop, maybe kind of rap format, building a record up with singles before, releasing a body of work. So the label picked Fred Archambault. Now, he did a lot of work with Avenged Sevenfold and I think some people from Atreyu. I'm not quite positive his whole discography at this point, but he was definitely an accomplished producer. Going into the studio with him, that was crazy for me. Now, I want to let you know, I just started singing clean vocals. Now, by clean vocals, I mean absolute melody. It's no dirt in there, no grime, nothing that I was used to. So I had to go into the studio with Fred kind of like, a Grom, very newbie-ish. Getting in there and kind of learning my craft as I was recording in like 2010 on basically a 14-song LP. So I was working with vocal coaches like Melissa Cross. I was doing all sorts of stuff at that time to become a great vocalist as quickly as humanly possible. Now, that being said, it was a long, grueling process, and recording at that level is something I haven't done in the past because I've always been a bass player and I've always walked in, did my job, and I'm out. And I love that part of it, but being the lead vocalist and the leader of the band and the lyricist and putting all the melodies together, it was super, super hard for me and super taxing. And I gotta say, Fred really did not help that process very much. He was used to working with people that were working fast. And for us, we were still young and we were trying to figure out who we were as a band and what we wanted to do. And at that point in time, if you look back at the scene, auto-tune was a big thing, man. It was a big thing in rap too at that point in time, but I wanted to incorporate a more EDM kind of rap type thing going on with the auto-tune vocals, and I wanted to add that into the album because it was part of who I was at the time, and I wanted that feel. So some of the album had that on it, and some of it did not. As I was trying to establish who I was in the studio, the label, and team was working on getting us on tours. Now at that time, we had an amazing booking agent. I do miss him, so I won't say his name, but I do miss him. What a great agent working for us, and I do feel bad what ended up happening later on. But he ended up getting us a tour with a band called X Japan. Now, we got the news while I was recording vocals in the studio with Fred, and the label was super stoked. Everyone was stoked. You're going to go on tour with X Japan. At that time, I had no idea who X Japan was, and I really didn't get to know who they were until the end of the tour, where I looked back on the whole process and I wanted to kick my teeth out, teeth that I still have, because I wanted to redo that whole process, because I had no idea the sheer size of X Japan, and that no other North American band has ever opened up for X Japan. Now, X Japan was like, I don't know, U2 or Motley Crue in Japan. I mean, the drummer had his own credit card with Hello Kitty on it. All of this stuff I really did not know until the end. So I really wasn't as excited as everybody else, because I wasn't sure what I was walking into. Now at that point in time, if you told me I was going on tour with, I don't know, Devil Wears Prada or Bring Me the Horizon at that time, I would have been, jumping in circles to go on that. But, we were by no means that excited to go on this X Japan tour. Now, I do really regret that, because, I even watched your documentary like not too long ago, and I'm looking back going, I cannot believe I was part of this, part of that culture, and I'm very thankful for that, for that moment. So, at that point in time, we're recording this album, we get this X Japan tour, and we're about to go on tour. Now, the album's not ready yet, but we have to go on tour, and I gotta sing some of these new songs. Now, at that point in time, tracks were just starting to become a thing in the scene, a thing that you integrated into your stuff. And I had no idea how to work that into anything in 2010. I had no idea. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm gonna have to sing all my stuff. I'm gonna have to be on key. I'm gonna have to scream, sing, everything, because nobody else was doing any work with me as far as on stage with the band. So I was the only vocalist. And we were about to go play 5,000 to 10,000 cat venues, some of these places, with this giant band that is absolutely amazing live. And I was scared out of my mind. It was a giant learning process for me. We get on this tour with this band, I mean, of such this caliber. This band was so giant. They had just buses upon buses upon buses, and they were flying into these venues. And, we were in some sort of really small 12-passenger van, crammed in, doing like 13, 14-hour drives. Sometimes I couldn't even warm up to actually sing, and just put on this giant stage to perform in front of these people that had no idea who we were. And so that was a giant learning experience for me, and it definitely helped me, turn into the person I am today. So from that point on, it was an ongoing learning process. We were getting all these really cool tours. I was learning how to integrate tracks into our set, so I can't both sing lead and harmony and group vocals. So we needed to try to integrate that all in, and I was learning that process slowly. And at that time, as you know, a band takes, it takes time to grow. Most bands at that point in time, in like 2009 through like 2014 or 15, it was like a 6-year process. Like you went out there, you toured, you knew it would be a building process, you knew that you had to just grind it out. But the people in my band at that time were broke. And the label, which didn't have to, I don't think any label does that nowadays, maybe back in like early 2000s, will give a serious amount of money, like advances, to the band so they can live. And that world was way over when we signed to our label. And so most of these people in my band were starving, and they were blaming me. But, at the same point in time, I was in the same boat as them, because I wanted to do the band, but I was ready to grind it out at all costs. So I'm sitting there, ready to grind it out, anything at all costs. I gave every bit of money I had towards the band, because as you know, touring is expensive, whether it be buying a van, being in a bus, being on the road, doing hotels. And at that point in time, the band wasn't getting paid. Even though it was my band collectively, we were in some sort of weird payment system like most bands are today. It was like faith. Everybody had like the same faith. We loved the music, we did this together, let's accomplish something. However, at that time, these members were growing an adamant animosity towards me, as though I was taking food and money out of their mouths. Because most of them never toured full time before. They had no idea what they were in for getting involved. So that was a very hard thing to deal with, being on tour with these people and them starting to hate me. So at that point in time, I started thinking about replacing members. And I started, having to get rid of certain people. And there was other extenuating circumstances what I had to deal with as well. And let me tell you about those now. Now we get this LP done and it's released. And actually, it had a good fanfare. It had good magazine articles about it. I think that the shittiest part about it is that I got ridiculed for the auto-tune vocals. I got ridiculed for wearing makeup. I got ridiculed for the band name being Vampires Everywhere and having to do with Twilight. I mean, they called us a sparkly metalcore vampire band. Sparkly, like metalcore vampire band. Like, we're going to go out in the sun and we're going to sparkle. And it was just blowing my mind because it just came from such a dark place, this band. The Lost Boys, my love for vampires and the whole gothic culture, it came from this place, and I was getting put in this other place. Now, you can see how this is starting to round out for me. And, it took a lot of proving for me once this album came out, to show people that I could sing, to show people that, I put effects in the vocals just because that's what I was feeling at the time. I had to prove to my band members what grinding is and that we'll eventually make it to the point we want to be. I had to prove to our label that we could possibly sell records. Now, mind you, at that point in time, the iTunes charts, and iTunes within itself wasn't this massive thing. People were still buying physical copies, and when the record came out, I guess we didn't do as much as the label wanted us to do. Now, we were number one on the iTunes metal chart for like 6 months. We were on that chart so long, even on, I remember it just sitting on there grinding, telling people to go download the record. And when I had showed people that we were, that I was working with my team about being number one on iTunes, it wasn't a big deal to them because they were still in a physical world. So it was a very, very hard place to be in. And I knew changes needed to be made, whether it be the band members, whether it be my approach to the music, whether it be our live show, whether it be our look, all that good stuff. It was just a hard grind during that period between like 2009 to the late 2011. So that part of the band was like a learning experience to me, learning what it's like to be on the road with no money, learning what it's like to deal with ungrateful band members. It was absolutely insane, I can't tell you. And then to top the cake, I'm dealing with all this crazy press, and then my bass player at the time decides, what? I'm just going to do gay porn to make money on the side. Now, mind you, do gay porn all you want. Do whatever you want. But, at least let me know you're going to go do it. At least, give our team a heads up that this is happening. Instead, the press gets a hold of it first in the scene, and that's another thing that added on to our band. So now we're Sparkly Vampires. Our name means something about Twilight. My band hates me. My bass player is doing gay porn. There's no money coming in. The records weren't doing what they should be doing. And I'm sitting here with my whole life invested into this band going, what am I going to do? Yeah, so it was pretty much anarchy. And at that time, I was dealing with, I even got pressed on Is Anyone Up, but I'm the only one who ever got pressed on Is Anyone Up that didn't show anything. There was no pictures of me naked. It was just them. Some guy who made our demos has me like mocking up melodies and posts me mocking up melodies like, oh, look, he can't sing, he can't do this band's crap. I was dealing with so much stuff. When I heard I was on Is Anyone Up, I was like, oh man, I'm okay with that because, I feel good about myself, But nah, it wasn't about that at all. It was just consistent bad press towards the band. And, it was crazy because we had this adamant fan base that loved our music, loved us live, loved my concepts and loved what we were doing. But I didn't have the group around me to facilitate a band that could, get to the pinnacle of music. So I knew I needed to make a change. I knew I needed to make a change with the sound and the look and everything. And that's when the 2012 Vampires Everywhere was born. Now, at that point in time, I kept one member of the band, and I don't mind saying his name's Aaron Graves. He was a super nice guy at the time. You know, someone that I wanted to stick around. He was there with the beginning with me when we were doing some sort of Disney band. I was a bass player, he was a guitar player, and he's like, let's do metal, and we went and did Vampires Everywhere, so I wanted him to be part of it. I got different band members in the band. I won't name them out. If you know that era of Vampires Everywhere in 2012, you'll know that lineup because we look exactly like Marilyn Manson. We look like Marilyn Manson's younger cousin in those photos. Now, I'll post something up so you can see this. This is my conceptual idea of going, okay, well, you're putting us in this scene world and you're putting us in this Twilight world, so I'm going to go the other direction and go as metal as I humanly possibly can to prove to everybody that that's where I wanted to go originally. Now, we're super crazy looking. I got these custom contact lenses, all that. And, you know, in my head at that time, you know, I'm so messed up. I had all my money, you know, put into this band, and I started believing crazy things about myself. It's like, you know, I started really getting into the vampire culture of things. Starting to think that, you know, maybe I'm a living vampire. Maybe I'm someone that has these psychic powers and drains people and all this kind of stuff. Now, maybe, I don't know, some of that could be true now. You know, I've heard a lot about me that I'm like this sort of psychic vampire and have a lot of energy. And, you know, that could be true. I mean, parts of that culture and the supernatural parts of the culture, they are divided. But I started believing all this occultist ideas about myself. And I just got into this mind frame of I will succeed. I will make a new record. I will make a new band around me. I will attack this. Now, at that time, I didn't know that the label, you know, they did not want to keep the band. I had no idea about that till later on. And we go in there, we make this record, you know, with these producers. Now, I may say to you that these producers, you know, they weren't the best. You know, they weren't the best, you know, at mixing. They weren't the best at laying down certain things, but they were very adamant about my ideas conceptually. And I don't want to throw them under the bus, but I will say that it didn't come out exactly like I wanted it to come out, but it came out nonetheless. And I ended up doing tonals throughout almost the whole record. I ended up researching, you know, all sorts of terminology, whether it be occultist, vampire, witchcraft, everything that I can kind of sink my teeth into to kind of incorporate that into the music. I wanted everyone to know that I was for real and what I was trying to make wasn't a joke. So I ended up making this album called Hellbound and Heartless. After the record was done, after the photos were done, after the first video was done, now may I add that at that point in time, Robbie Starbuck, before he blew up, got to do our video, and Robbie was amazing doing our video, and we started off doing the first single called Drug of Choice. Now to me, that's basically active rock radio today, and I kind of threw my own spin on it, a lot of tonals, a lot of low creepy vocals, very hard hitting, very heavy guitar, and I was super stoked on how that video came out, and I want to thank anyone that's watching this, especially Kent Caliber, who helped me put it together over there at Sinister. You know, Tim Skold, who was DJing in it. Tim was in Marilyn Manson. Also has really cool bands going on now. There was an amazing video, and it kind of came across exactly like I wanted to come across. It was dark, it was evil, and it was hard. And it was definitely a video to lead this whole new rebellion that I was going to do. Now, at the time, you know, the label came out to check us out, and they really liked the new ideas. They really liked the new songs. And so they decided to put more faith into the band and release it. Now, I want to thank Century Media for doing that. You know, anybody that shows faith like that is always in the good book with me. Now, at that time, you know, we were getting added to the 2012 Vans Warped Tour. Now, we were added to the whole Warped Tour. Now, for most of you that know Warped Tour culture, 2012 was one of the best years. Now, I want to thank Kevin Lyman, anyone at Warped Tour and on his team that just, you know, looked at our band and knew we were real, felt a good vibe from us, knew we could kind of succeed playing the festival. I mean, Kevin, thank you so much. If you see this, thank you for doing that, because you've made my career. Even my bands before that you put on the tour, you've really helped me out and you've really started my career. So I couldn't be more grateful for that. So 2012 Warped Tour. wow, was that a big year. We were on the Monster stage with Sleeping with Sirens, Motionless in White. I'm pretty sure it was Every Time I Die, the Ghost Inside. There were so many amazing bands on that stage, and we got to kind of come up with all of these bands during that time, and there was this new regime of vampires, and I was really, really stoked. We're on 2012 Warped Tour. Things are going great. We covered a song from Nirvana called Rape Me, and we were playing that, every day on Warped Tour. And all these different bands, whether it be Newfound Glory or Vanna, or these bands at the time were coming up and singing the songs with us or watching us. Jeff Rickley from Thursday came up and did a song with us. It was surreal. It was surreal going from like this band that everyone loved to hate to a band that everyone was starting to respect and watching us live and seeing that we had this thing going on. Whether it had been, the new direction, the new look, all the vocal training I was getting, all of the stuff that was involved with that 2012 encompassed a new Vampires Everywhere and a whole new feeling surrounding the band. It's around this time I started to lose my mind into vampire culture. I started dating this porn star girl, and she kept putting things in my head. And they weren't negative things. They were things that would uplift you. But I began toying with blood play, messing around with Ouija boards, all sorts of these sexual adventures that I was having with this person. And I'm not going to say I regret any of this stuff. I definitely think it made me who I am today. But my headspace was in outer space. And this is when things started taking a very, very weird turn. So I'm sitting up here in outer space, and I'm trying to propel the band into stardom. I mean, anyone that knows what band life is like, every day is a struggle to try to best yourself, to try to get into a better position, get on a better tour, maybe put out a better song. And at that point in time, the band was gaining momentum, and people are starting to get into it for the right reasons. And I wanted to, dominate my scene. I wanted to get on the biggest and best tours. But my headspace was absolutely bananas, and here I am walking around like I believe I'm a living vampire for the most part, and I was losing my mind. I was losing my mind. Now, at that time, I had a roommate who moved into my crib, which was my ex-bass player, and he got with a different porn star, but his scenario kind of went a little bit different. He ended up quitting the band. He ended up stealing all my forks and spoons. He ended up ganging up on me with different people. I mean, I got in so many fights in LA over this kind of stuff. And so he was gone. So the band became a four-piece after that, and we decided to, start writing demos for the new record. And it's around this time of us starting to write new vampire material is when I met my ex-fiance at the time. No one actually knew fiance, but my ex-fiance, which I won't name. Now, if you know that person, you know who she is. And that's the point in time where I started rethinking my whole plan about what I was doing with my band, with my voice, and the path I was about to take in music. So at that time, I want to say it's 2013, maybe 14, it was like Vampires is at its pinnacle. We just headlined the Rob Zombie's Big Adventure. We were getting slated for another Warped. We were starting to headline shows. It was a really, really good feeling. We had this amazing agent still. We still had the label behind us. But I got with this girl, and she ended up getting signed to this major record label. And I got dragged through this whole crazy process, and I got put around all these crazy people. Now, what I mean is, when you're coming out of the scene, it's one thing. And then when you go into this world of major record labels and Grammys and some of these people that you thought you'd never meet in your life, it's a whole other thing. I went from playing things like Warped Tour to hanging out with Rihanna, going backstage to Eminem concerts. It was absolutely bananas. It was an amazing experience, and that experience I'll never forget. But the girl I was with had a lot of issues, and it started warping my mind. And it started making me think, well, I want to be in this world. I can compete in that world. This is something that I want, and I want to see that if I can do that with myself, I can go to this place. And at this time, it's when I decided to end the first chapter of Vampires Everywhere at our peak and start a band called The Killing Lights. Now, this was the stupidest mistake I probably ever made in music at that time, because I had such an amazing team, and transferring over to that band was not a good call. Now, we wanted to go more radio rock, and that's never a good idea to write music for something, and that's what ended up happening. So we started this band called the Killing Lights, and we went to Europe. We ended up getting a tour right away to Europe, and that was our first tour with the Killing Lights. And I thought, you know what, I'm changing everything up. I have all this association. You know, we're gonna go to radio, we're gonna make this big band. And you know, what ended up happening is I let myself down, and it became something that was more of like a cry for help than, you know, it became something more like an abomination than a creation. So I had this band called the Killing Lights, and the girl I was with, you know, I ended up proposing to her. It was the worst thing I ever did. If you do hear choppers, it has nothing to do with sound effects for this, although they would be appropriate right now. But I ended up proposing to this girl, and from that day on, my life started going downhill. Now, I thought for sure that I would be propelled into something different with all the people that I was associating with how, you know, at that point in time, the label was still interested in pushing what my next project would be and going to radio with it and doing all of this stuff. And what ended up happening is that my relationship ended up ending. My best friend and guitar player at that time ended up leaving the band. And by the way, ended up getting with my ex, which is a no-no in bro code, just so you know. You don't get with somebody else's ex-fiance if you're friends. You just don't do that. He's still on my really hate list right now. Can't get off that easily. In any case, that ended up happening. So I got a band that went downhill. I lost my fiance basically because she was, you know, pretty much batshit crazy, and it dragged me down with her, and lost my best friend all at the same time. So I was like, what am I going to do with myself? Do I continue music? What should I do? In retrospect, I'm happy that I did what I did, but I should have thought it through a little more heavily. So what I thought about doing was, let's bring back Vampires Everywhere. And this is where Vampires Everywhere 2.0 comes in, and this is somewhere around 2015 time, somewhere around there. And at that time, you know, with my relationship ending, I got to focus directly on who I was. I got a really badass vocal coach. I just stayed in my house, played piano, just get all the keys right, and I wanted to make the best record. So I asked my homeboy, Matt Good, you might know him from all the records he's doing now, but back then, he was just starting out with it, and he was in a band called From First to Last. Now, I ended up making a really dope record with him, so I ended up recording this album with Matt Good, and I titled it Ritual. You know, I wanted to get back to my roots. I wanted to get away from all this hippity hoopla about radio, all this major label stuff that I was just engulfed with. I knew that I needed to get it back who I was and kind of tap into that again. And, you know, the relationship ending and me parting ways with the label, and, you know, I didn't end up taking the option with the label. That was stupid at the time. I was so screwed up. I was drinking every day. You know, I've never been an alcoholic, but I've always used alcohol as something that curbed my anxiety, or eating. You know, a lot of us do that. But at that time, it was curbed my anxiety, and I was just going downhill. And during that time, you know, my stepfather died, which made me spiral down, and I knew I needed to get my stuff together so I can get back on track and do what I love to do the only thing I know how to do, because I've been doing this for so long now that this is all I had. So I needed to restart Vampires, and I did. I put a new band together with a new album that Matt Good did a great job writing the music for, and I set out trying to headline shows. Now, I worked so hard for like a year and a half, 2 years trying to reboot this band. And then only to find out that, you know, people were still looking at it in a certain light, and I wasn't able to get certain opportunities that I wanted to get in music to, you know, to further my career and keep this going. Now, most of you know, look how much money it takes. It's just like playing ice hockey. You need the skates, you need all the equipment, you need the money to travel. You know, it's expensive to do anything, and music is one of these most expensive things you could possibly do. Investing in yourself and others around you to go out on the road or put out albums that you're basically putting all the money in yourself. Because labels, you know, they help. They help with distribution, they help with videos, they help with the minor things that help your band get to where it needs to be. But at the same time, all the travel costs and all of that stuff is mostly on you. Now, this is when I started having the idea of paying my band. Now, it was a great concept because it was like, okay, if I do this, I could still keep the control of everything and everyone will show up to everything and not be angry because they're getting paid. So that ended up working to my advantage, and that was really, really good idea, and it kept everyone happy at the time. So I have this band, Vampires Everywhere. I'm trying to keep this going. This is around the time, I think like 2015, 16 is when I first met out with Ronnie Radke. I was like, hey man, you know, I'd love for you to help write maybe a Vampires record or something new, an album, because you just have a knack for doing these really incredible records. And I wanted to step out of my box, you know, because I've been doing this for so long, and you know, I'm a roller coaster ride. I needed someone else to look in on the band and kind of say, you know, this is what you should do, and help me out. And you know, I had a lot of advice from people around me at that time that were super successful that said, change the name of the band, and try to do something new, and have Ronnie produce the album. And that's when I became Dead Girls Academy. So Dead Girls Academy kind of spawned like 2016, around that time. And you know, the name came to fruition. So it's around this time we joined the End Is Here tour. And that was a massive tour. That was Falling Reverse, it was Motionless in White, that was Issues. And at the time, Danger Kids, you all know Alex is in my band now. And so it was a massive tour. And that's what kicked off Dead Girls Academy. Now, Vampires Everywhere will always have a place in my heart. Anyone that's ever got tattooed, you know, with VE on them, just know I love and respect all of you. I can't thank you enough for being part of Vampires Everywhere. But as most of you know, in order for a band to keep going, in order for a band to keep playing shows and making albums, you need a crazy amount of fan support. You need a crazy amount of money to keep things going. And at that point in time, Vampires Everywhere became more of a passion project, and I needed to move to something that was more me at the time, that being Dead Girls Academy. I'm very happy to where I am right now with the band. I have an amazing lineup. We had amazing stuff going on. I don't want to get too much into Dead Girls Academy, what's going on with the band now, or what just happened with Victory Records, or any of that kind of stuff. I just want to say I'm very content to where I am, and I'm very excited for the future, and I'm very excited for all our fans, new and old, to hear what we have coming out soon. And that'll be a single probably sometime in late March or April. Thank you so much for watching this video. Again, please subscribe. I'm completely new to vlogging, so if I'm not looking in the right spot or not saying the right thing sometimes, forgive me. If you have any questions about this video, please comment below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you so much.